Welcome, everyone. Great to have you all with us today. And thank you, Sean. Thank you, Sean, for joining us. We've got a really exciting presentation today. We're going to be talking about our top secret scanning. So, Sean, we'll give everyone a couple minutes as we really wind up. But I guess as we're waiting here, this is a topic that this is one that I'm excited for. I get excited for all of these topics,
Yeah.
but this one specifically, this is a real challenge. How do you dive into top secret environments? How do you win projects? In top secret environments. What are people most concerned about? Obviously, the data security, but what is it that it takes to win those kind of jobs, to execute them, and why is this something that how have you gained so much experience and expertise in this field?
Yeah, I mean, we're certainly going to dive into it, but I think, ironically, when we talk about this internally, we like accidentally have this really stellar portfolio of working in spaces like this that like wasn't planned. To be honest with you, it was, it, every time I write a proposal for a client in this space and I type up a nice cover letter or something like that that goes on the front of the proposal, it's like, man, we've got a stellar portfolio of working in really sensitive and challenging spaces and that we didn't plan. We got brought in by other clients, or we got brought in by, we got cold called by places, and then all of a sudden it was like, wow, we this is a relevant project, and that's a relevant project. It's funny. I think it's something that I feel very confident. Like we've got a wide portfolio of work in this space that we didn't seek, and now we do seek it. I think we do try to make connections in places and say, hey, we're used to working in facilities like yours. Will you give us a shot? That we kind of just tripped into, which is really cool, especially for being primarily a construction management firm. We'll talk about
Mm-hmm.
that too in a minute, just to tease it up. But to kind of be primarily a team that is supporting our CM work, and then turn around and wake up and have a lot of work at federal defense, DoD, and defense contractor levels is really cool. So I'm looking
Yeah,
forward to that.
yeah. I'm looking forward to this too, and I think this is an area that uh, will. This is an area that I think doesn't get spoken about quite often enough.
I
Because
think that's the
it's a
point,
hard
James.
topic to talk about it. Yeah, that's
That's
why
the
that's
point.
why
It's
we're
not
here.
supposed to be spoken about.
Yeah. So I'm excited to dive in here and for you to share more, walk in that piece where it's like, here's the best practices, here's kind of all of the things that we can share and can talk about, while obviously maintaining that integrity and helping people, implement those pieces. So we're a few minutes in. I think we can start driving right into the content now.
Yeah, for sure. So again, thank you for having me. I think we'll talk a little bit about my background in a second, but I think really our hope and our goal today, what we're really trying to get to, is talking about working in security sensitive industries, right? So, for us, that is not always it's not always military bases. It's not always defense contractors. Sometimes that could be as simple as some transportation spaces as well. And we'll talk about that. Something that you would think, like is federal in its own way, but like usually is not
Mhm.
contracted federally. You know what I mean? Like we'll talk about some of the work we do in the airport here at Boston that is a private entity, but has federal oversight and things like that. And certainly, of course, it has a huge security piece to it that needs to be maintained. So we'll talk about, I think, talking the talk with organizations and institutions that have a security first mindset, and what are the things we should be demonstrating as service providers in this market to get them to trust us working in their spaces, right? We're working with highly detailed, highly accurate, high resolution imagery and surveying, in which we are privy to information. We see things and we see information that they don't want anybody else to see. And so when their staff, their full-time employees, can't even take photos in their space of their lunch, but yet we're able to walk in there and take billions and billions of dimensionable points and photos and
Yeah.
stuff and still be able to operate. We'll talk about what that looks like and how to I don't want to say pitch the client into using the service, but really sort of educating them on how these technologies, the LiDAR space, can be used in areas where security is key. We'll talk about some tips and tricks that we've learned over the last 10 plus years of working in these spaces, the way that we write our work plans and our proposals to the client to demonstrate an understanding of working in their spaces and what the expectation is of us before they even set an expectation of us. I think in a lot of cases, they don't know what expectations they need to set of us. And so to guide them to the finish line, we'll talk about that. And then the most important piece, maybe, of working in facilities like this is data security and maintaining that confidentiality, making sure that there's walking away from the project site with a treasure trove, really, of sensitive information, making sure that it's been cleaned up, ways to make sure that it doesn't fall into the wrong hands. We'll cover some tips and tricks that we've learned from that there.
Awesome.
So why don't we start with you, James? You want to give a little introduction and we can go into my background?
Yeah, I'll give a quick
that mustache looks really good on this 4K screen that
I'm It's real. It's real. I didn't stick that one on, at least not for that photo. I didn't. Yeah. But I'm James Mosman. I'm a customer success manager here at Reality Capture Network. Many of you know me, through either personally or hopefully watching lots of our content. I have my background in mathematics and my degree, and then my background professionally with reality capture technology. How I came to know Sean and many of you is through sales. And so I really love the implementation of the business practicality of this kind of technology, blended with obviously the very technical pieces that I've learned through my education role. So that's a little my background. Sean, let's move over to you.
Yeah, so as mentioned, my name is Sean Doyle. Switching there, here we go. There's a way too large photo of my face. So my title is Director of Integrated Design. That's a new title for me. That's just because in recent years I've made a shift to other services and other business units that our team is doing, that is more architecture, engineer, and owner focused. We do a little bit of architectural design and stuff like that now, but really my background, I came up and sort of co-developed with a number of people on my staff, as well as my supervisor, our in-house reality capture team, the 3D laser scanning services team. So for the better part of now almost 12 years, I've been at Bond. The first 10 or so was really focused on bringing in laser scanning into our firm, using it as a construction quality control tool, using it as a pre-con tool, an as-building tool, really getting that interfaced into our firm. And then, for 5 years after that, really focused on turning Bond into an industry partner with architects, engineers, owners. We'll talk in a minute, but about a little over 60% of our work actually is not even in support of our CM services. We actually do quite a bit of work outside the firm as a service provider direct to owners and architects and engineers, which is great. A shameless plug here. I am the chairman of the RCN committee for laser scanning and LiDAR. So if you're a participant on this call and you are not involved in that organization, I very, very much encourage you to reach out to the folks at RCN and make sure you sign up on that. That's really going to kick off in the next few weeks here in terms of starting to get projects going and deliverables and white papers and presentations and infographics. A lot of great stuff is going to come out of that committee. And I'm very humbled to have been selected to chair that as the first person, getting that committee started. And so that's just a little bit of background about me. I'll just talk about Bond on the whole. I work for Bond Building. Technically, we have two companies, a civil company and a vertical construction company, totaling about $1 billion a year in backlog. That's really kind of grown in the last few years. As I mentioned, we primarily, I shouldn't say primarily, our first and foremost objective is to support our business from the construction management side, constructability reviews, QA/QC, pre-con, existing conditions documentation. That's sort of our first charter. But secondarily, or really in terms of billable working hours, most of our work is actually as a service provider in this industry for 3D scanning and modeling. We'll work directly for hospitals, engineering companies, architecture companies. We do a lot of campus-wide university type work in which we're documenting dorms or science buildings, things like that. And so 65% of our work or billable time in a given year is directly for owners, institutions, architects, and engineers. Bond, the construction management company, works in healthcare, higher ed, K-12. We have a district energy division, which is focused on CHP, CUPS, and cogens, things of that nature. And then our civil company does a lot of electrical, gas, and utility transmission line stuff. So we've got a wide range of stuff. We've touched it all. We've seen it all. We've worked in it all. And we've got sort of a national presence too. I mean, we've done work as far as Texas and Florida, down in the Gulf, working in refineries and process plants and things of that nature. And then as we kind of teed off for the call here, we've kind of developed sort of accidentally, I would say, a really great and expansive portfolio working for DoD, working for federal. In some cases, we've been reached out to sort of directly for that work. In other cases, maybe an architect or an engineer who's working on a project in those spaces has brought us in as a consultant. But just to kind of give a little snapshot of some of the clients we've worked for, when we're talking about this technology in sort of these spaces, I mean, I don't know, you can kind of see it here, James, a very expansive list. I mean, we've done work on the Capitol grounds down in DC. We've done work for very sensitive and secure areas in all parts of the Federal Reserve. And then we've done a lot of, we've done some military base work, utility upgrade type projects, things like that around the Army, around the Air Force, around the Coast Guard, multiple joint base type situations, the Army Corps of Engineers, things like that. And then whether through our CM services or in some cases directly, I mean, we do get brought in on projects at the defense contractor level and the sort of federally funded research and development center type projects like the MIT Lincoln Laboratories of the world up here in Boston. We've done some work for BAE Systems. We've had conversations with Raytheon or RTX, whatever you want to call them now, Lockheed Martin. So we continue to kind of look for and grow this technology in those markets. And it was totally by accident. It's like we woke up one day and we had 15 or 20 projects in federal courthouses or other facilities and things like that are super security sensitive. And sort of, created a really great portfolio of work. One of our biggest clients, I think, is Massport here at the airport. They're the operator of Logan Airport here in Boston. We had a term contract with them for 2 years in which we would survey their spaces, either pre-construction or post-construction, as an on-call doctor service contract. We actually just got one of 2 contracts from them that they just issued for the next 4 years to inventory all of their space. And they don't own just the airport. They have Boston Logan, they have Worcester, they have Bedford, they have a cruise ship terminal, they have a shipping terminal, they've got the World Trade Center here in Boston. Definitely, I think we've really established ourselves very well working in these facilities as a trusted partner, right? In how we can operate in spaces that have security concerns. You're privy to sensitive information. You're hearing conversations you probably shouldn't be hearing, and so we'll talk a little bit now about how to gain folks' trust and demonstrate the right way to work in these facilities that you're maintaining security, you're maintaining confidentiality. Any thoughts on that before we jump in?
Yeah, no, I think we can just jump in. This is the kind of part that excites me the most because, it's like obviously we're seeing this, client sampling that you have. And, these are big names who obviously have very sensitive info. So how do you get in with them, and how do you start getting that confidence? How do you win jobs to work in a secure environment? How do you gain the confidence from these clients with the most classified information to know, yep, Sean's going to take care of this, and there are no concerns, like you said, that maybe their own employees can't even take a photo of their luncheon. How do you bring this kind of technology, communicate and educate on what the technology is, and then create a planned infrastructure to do that? That's a big sell, in a lot of ways. It's a big ask. It's big trust that you gain.
Yeah, and so I'll just kick off the first bullet point here, right? And the funny thing is I think we learned very quickly in a lot of these spaces, especially in the research, the government defense contractor research type of facilities. They know this technology, right? Like they're like LiDAR is not a new thing to them. I mean, are doing targeting systems for fighter jets and or they're doing radio frequency stuff. They're working in aerospace. They're working in space, right? So like LiDAR and the idea of laser based technology is like not new to them, right? They know the tech, they know they don't know the hardware, right? They don't know the use case necessarily, but they know the technology. They know what LiDAR is and what it's capable of. And so, you do get a very savvy client when you're working in these facilities. The Massport thing, I'll just touch on real quick, right? Like they're driving all of this spending and technology initiatives. Like it's important to them that they're using these technologies to document their space. So they do know what it is and what it's capable of. It is critical. It's absolutely important that you are aware of what your equipment is and what it is capable of. We're a Faro shop. For most of this stuff, we have SLAM scanners and stuff like that as well. If I speak to sort of our specific technologies or I show examples, that's just because we have our Faro shop. But certainly if you're like a shop, a ZNF shop, somebody like that, certainly understanding your equipment and how to operate. And it's not even just the equipment, but what is your workflow? What is your field workflow? What is your post processing workflow? What is your data management workflow, right? Like you have to know your delivery system inside and out because certainly when having conversations with these clients, you're going to have to modify it to meet their security concerns. You're going to have to modify it to meet some higher up who will never see sort of the results of your work but is skeptical of using this technology in such secure spaces. It's really important that you understand inside and out what you are and are not capable of. And by the way, there's no sense in lying, right? There's no sense in trying to push it through. The checks and balances systems will exist on these projects in which if you've been instructed to scrub the data, but you're using a system in which is cloud-based registration and you don't have access to scrubbing the data, like a Matterport or a VLX, where it's sort of out of your control, they will know and they will find out. And so it's very important that you're bringing the right tools to the job in which you can work in these types of facilities. And I'll just touch that last bullet point real quick. Like I cannot say this enough. So much of this is not so much about the quality of your work or your portfolio of work. Like we have a great portfolio of work in this space, but every time we write a proposal, we have to be very clear in our project approach on what the client will be expected out of working with us, right? So it can't be short enough, it can't be long enough, really, in terms of describing the process, what the client will expect to see during the process, and how you're mitigating their security and confidentiality concerns to make sure that you're not leaving the site with information they wouldn't want to fall into the wrong hands when you pitch them, right? Um, it's sort of a cliche, right? But like trust is so paramount, so paramount about working in these facilities. When we walk in to a pitch or a kickoff meeting with the client, if we're having sort of a coordination call about an RFQ, like from the very first day you meet the client, you have to demonstrate that you're a trustworthy partner for them in working in their space. I think one thing that we didn't really highlight as a bullet point is if you are a trustworthy client, if you're a trustworthy service provider to these types of clients, they will spend unlimited money and time and resources with you because they know the quality of the work that they're going to get and that you've demonstrated an ability to work in their facility. I think in a lot of public work or in a lot of university work, right, that work tends to get spread around. Maybe you're really tight with one project manager, but not another project manager. Another project manager likes a different competitor of yours. And so the work gets kind of shared. In a lot of these facilities, they like having the same known entity across all of their work. And so it's really important to establish that trust really early in the process and prove to them the conversation should not be focused on here's what we're going to do for you, and here's what you're going to get for a deliverable. The conversation should really be focused around, we want to be your partner in solving this issue. We want to be flexible. We want to go through whatever it takes for data scrubbing and removing information and operating in your spaces that, like, you, under no certain terms, when you walk away from this, in our case, man, we really liked working with Bond on this, and they had our best interest in mind. And that kind of touches on that second point there, right? Where, you have to demonstrate from the get-go when talking and working with these clients, like, listen, we understand that you have a need that you're trying to solve. You're trying to document your spaces and streamline your construction processes and renovation work and stuff like that. But we're going to help you solve that. That's the easy part. That's the part we do all the time. It is absolutely imperative to us that we do that in a situation that we don't ever put you, especially if you're working with a capital planning person, right, who's maybe knowledgeable about the technology and the services that they're using within those spaces, but not an engineer, right? There's sort of the builder aspect of a multinational organization with super sensitive security needs, that they're not read in on a lot of the stuff, and they can't know about a lot of the stuff that they're doing in their own buildings that they're renovating, right? And so building that partnership, building that trust, and demonstrating to your contact at these organizations, like, we understand how important it is that we don't capture the wrong thing, we don't see the wrong thing, we don't hear the wrong thing, and that we are never ever going to walk off site with information that, if you were ever worried about falling into the wrong hands for somebody, like, it's just not going to happen. We're going to make sure we plan, we execute, we talk logistics, and here's a very comprehensive process that we'll go through to make sure that when we walk off the job site after 3, 4, 5, 10 days of surveying, whatever it is, that you can sleep soundly at night, that we're not taking the wrong information. And one thing that I'll say, I think we, as an industry, right, tend to write proposals and estimates, thinking project by project, right? And so I'll tie that really big, bold bullet point at the bottom right back into the first point, right? In these situations, you cannot write your proposals, you cannot have your conversations focused on just the project. You really need to be aware and understand the needs of the client and what's important to the client, what the expectations are for the client. And so when you're kicking off these projects, when you're having these conversations, when you're writing your proposals, you're writing to the client based on what is important to them and what's their concern, not necessarily just, here's our approach and what we plan to do. You know what I mean? It needs to go deeper than that. I think it needs to go deeper than just, here's our project approach. We've had great success winning a lot of work in this space by telling the client, we understand these things are important to you, and here's how we're going to solve them. And then the actual delivery of what they need, the models, the point clouds, whatever it is sort of the afterthought. Really, it's really the byproduct of that process.
Yeah, I think that's beautifully put. You guys are establishing that trust. All that trust is what, the sale is the end effect of, doing right by the client and taking all the necessary precautionary steps to make sure that they know you have their absolute best interest, not the sale. The sale
Absolutely.
comes, but you're saying we want to protect you, and especially for, you said, whoever's in charge of the job himself, whoever has some of that personal responsibility to make sure data is not, data doesn't go into the wrong hands. You're stepping saying, we want to protect you, like, and we understand this, like, help us make sure that we protect you. That's our role. That's our goal, is to operate as your partner.
The pitch is already done, right? Like, you're at the table in a lot of
Yeah.
cases for these. Like, you're at the table. They know they want the service. And to be honest with you, this is an industry, I think, in which cost, nobody should ever be greedy, of course, right? We don't want to be a greedy industry, but, like, the cost and, like, all that stuff is not arbitrary, but it's a lower priority than it would be in other industries or with other clients, right? A university with a finite amount of spending is going to want to go with somebody who's cost effective and cheaper and whatever. This is an industry in which, like, the trusted partner, if that costs them 10 or 15% more to get the trusted partner who's not going to cause a security concern with their information, they will pay for that contractor, right? And
Yep.
so, you know, coming to the table and bringing a mindset and a focus that is like, I already know what your concerns are, because they know what their concerns are, but they don't know how to formalize it. They don't know how to say it out loud in a lot of cases if this is new technology to them. And it's like, listen, we've done this work in other facilities before. I know what your concerns are. You're worried about this, you're worried about that, you're worried about this and that. Here's how we plan to solve it. And then the conversation about scope and cost and accuracy, that's just sort of a secondary piece to that process.
Yep.
So
Awesome.
how do we deliver that work, right? So like, okay, we've got the client, we've talked to the client's happy, we've got a very clear work plan and going through. And so I think more than ever, I think of our work. I think of our work in some of these defense contractor spaces. I think of our work in the transportation spaces in which there's secure areas and all that. Communication is king, right? Communication is the utmost important thing, and that will be a recurring theme throughout the rest of this webinar, right? Sort of telling the client, communicating with the client, having their best interest in mind, and then when you get to sort of the planning stage, the operation stage, right? There's such an impact if it's an airport, if it's the U.S. Capitol building, if it's the Federal Reserve Bank, right? Like there's a downstream impact to the people working in those spaces in which communication cannot be understated. And so sequence and planning and trying to stick to that, right? We're going to be in these spaces at this time on this day. You can notify the end users that in this 4-hour block, we're going to come through for the next 2 hours. And sort of being that partner and documenting that and creating a sequence and a schedule and marking up floor plans and creating logistics plans and sharing that information is so, so important. And then, really, I think that working in these sensitive areas, right, everybody's senses are heightened to like something is sort of afoot in this space that doesn't feel normal. And so, things like signage and email blast postings of what to expect. And I'll show you an example of something we've done in the past in a second here. Like that information flow really to the downstream end users, so critical, because they for their entire career, let's say, have been trained to identify things that are abnormal to their space, that could be a potential security impact, that could be a potential confidentiality risk, right? And so getting that communication sent out, having those floor plans and logistics plans and sequence plans that can be easily shared, throughout the building, throughout the space. They can be hung in the airport. They can be hung in the corridors of a research facility or something like that, that somebody will quickly identify, stop, digest, and say, okay, when they come across you or you come across them into their space to work, they're already sort of aware that you're supposed to be there. And I think that that's really important. You have to have a good plan, and you really have to stick to that plan. The other thing that we've learned in a lot of these facilities is they're just, whether I certainly don't have a secret or a top secret clearance to be working in these spaces. Nobody would ever sponsor us for one of those, right? Because we don't work for those. We don't work for Raytheon, but Raytheon will sponsor their people to do top secret clearances and things like that, right? Part of that plan, and part of like maybe in this instance where you might want to just show up and start scanning and do the work, sometimes it's really important to just spend time to do a walkthrough with the client to be like, this is an absolute no-go, can't touch it, right? Just not going to happen. And you'll never know why. You'll never know what they're doing in there. They'll never tell you. They can't tell you. But I think we've had to learn to be very adaptive on the fly of like, we all would love this very linear process. You're working through the building in a very structured, very linear way. It's maintaining your accuracies all the way through. And then in these types of spaces, whether it's an airport, a cruise ship terminal, the steam tunnels of, a congressional office building, whatever it is, you're going to come to a space where under either somebody doesn't have the key, they can't give you the key, or you just can't go in there. And so we've had to be very creative, I think, and planning that in advance of like, hey, we know our registration process, our sequence, our plan is going to break here. What are we doing to maintain accuracy? What are we doing to leapfrog that space and make sure that we don't have a scope gap that's greater than the space we know we can't go into? That's really well done. It's really marginalized, I should say, by planning that out really early in the process. we've spent an entire day doing a walkthrough in some of these facilities that we plan to scan that we could have just shown up and scanned in an entire day, right? You know what I mean? Like it's kind of ironic to spend a day doing the planning phase for what is ultimately a day worth of work. But to build that trust and that rapport with the client, to know your plan when you get there so that you're not going to have surprises is a worthy investment. And it helps everybody feel like they're on the same page.
So with those kind of scenarios, how deep into the technicalities do you get with the client? You're talking about a job that's already won, so you're not really pitching those
Yeah.
technicalities in some sense, but you are getting into them. Like you said, there's a no-go, so you got to bridge, this
Yeah,
big.
there's an educational piece to it for sure. Like it's saying to the clients, like, listen, we want to make you aware. We're going to have, let's say we had two halves of a building, or let's say we had three-thirds of a building, and you could do one half and you could do the other half, and it's on the seventh floor, but you can't do the third in the middle, right? Hey, listen, we want just to make you aware, there's no way right now to really accurately say, here's one third of the building that we can do, here's the other third in the middle. Like we may have to align those sort of independently. So you're losing that accuracy in the middle. Or you might have to say, you know what, we didn't really want to do it or we didn't want to have to do it, but now we need to run down a staircase at one end to another floor, across and back up. There's an accuracy loss there, probably, right? Because you don't have this nice closed loop or anything like that. But educating the client of like, we might be introducing a half an inch or an inch of play here just because we have to do this long traverse that's not, or maybe we need to do survey control and we wouldn't have done it. So now there's a cost impact. I think you just have to have the conversation with the client. You have to strike that balance between, hey, how accurate do you need this to be? Do you want it to be versus, we can't get into some of these spaces and whatever. And it just, I'll tell you 99 times out of 100, if you say, hey, listen, if you want this accurate to what you've sent us in an RFQ or an RFP, but we can't tie it through these spaces, we need to do something else that has a cost impact. Times out of 100, they're going to pay the additional costs. So I think it comes down to having a conversation with the client and educating them on, okay, we understand we can't go through this third. We have no way to connect the other two thirds. Here's what to expect, or we can mitigate it this way, but it might have additional costs. So it comes down to communication.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. And I think your whole approach in that framing it, you're so evidently focused not on the project itself. You can handle the details and the
Yeah,
specifics, all the technicalities, focused on ensuring that that you are their trusted partner. You're not focused on project efficiency and scanning. If you're taking a whole extra day to do a job that could be done that day, it's not like, hey, like we got to get this done. It's like, no, take the extra time to
right,
communicate and leave no ambiguity anywhere
right.
in between. Like we'll be upfront, detailed, everything, make sure they are perfectly clear and obviously executing that. But the mindset is less on, cost efficiency and time efficiency and
Yeah,
making sure that you've got, your proposal, perfectly. You think the details are critical, but it's the details on the safety element and spending the extra time and effort and
absolutely.
communicating the impacts on the relationship impacts and gaining their trust is really, really the critical and the extra effort piece.
I'll tell you what, in all of these facilities, whether it's been federal for us, whether it's been a defense contractor, whether it's been transportation, TSA type situations, everything is a test. Everything is a test. You might spend a day of site walks with the client and to look at spaces and understand spaces, what they look like, how you're going to sequence them, how you're going to connect spaces that are broken for a day worth of scanning. But like that's just because the project is sort of small. But like you've gone through that process. The next time when the project's 4 or 5 days worth of scanning, right? Like you've sort of you've covered that, right? You're now that trusted partner, and so maybe next time you are going to do a day's worth of site walk, but it's 3 weeks worth of scanning. Well, it's worth it to you in the end to kind of build that trust and understand and show up with a plan. Show up with a plan. I'll just show this as an example. This is obviously redacted. I love actually we're having a classified secret conversation. I actually got to
Yeah.
redact the document to show you, right? So I've stripped the building names and client names out of this document, but this is an actual piece of signage that we developed for a client on a project we did recently. And I'm hopefully, while it's been up here for the last 3 or 4 minutes, people have had a chance to read it. I'm obviously not going to read it verbatim, but this is the kind of stuff that we'll do, right? And this is probably a little more technical than we would do in a lot of cases, but where the client is sort of technology savvy, right? It's important to this is something that was distributed and disseminated to the end users weeks and weeks in advance of us going there, and then taped up in the corridors. So when they came out of the cafeteria, there's this sign that catches your eyes. And it's lengthy. It's got a lot more text than probably our marketing team would want to have it. But somebody will stop and read this and they see you working in their space, or all of a sudden you come into their space. They know what to expect. They know what you're there for. They know what you're doing. They know why you're doing it and what they need to be doing. And so for us, getting this, in a lot of projects like this is hard to do in a major airport terminal, right? Like you can't email the 300,000 passengers who pass through Logan every day and to say, hey, here's what to expect. We're laser scanning your space. But in a research facility with like an office setting, right, you certainly can get this out in advance. And so, this, I think I won't go through it, but sort of tackles what to expect during the field process, what you're going to see. And also, we know you have some security concerns that we've already addressed with the people sort of handling that process. And so don't worry, don't worry about it. We know we're not supposed to be scanning that blueprint that's sitting on your desk. We're going to scrub it later. You know what I mean? We're going to clean it up later. Nobody will ever see it. It's not the end, don't worry about it. And also out in advance that people sort of knew we were coming. So if they had sensitive information, like sensitive blueprints to different things, or if they had emails that shouldn't be seen, or Excel spreadsheets that shouldn't be seen, right, they expect us to be coming. They've cleaned up their desk, they've put away or hidden things that maybe shouldn't be accidentally captured. Something like this sort of signage and getting that out, right, is sort of really key, right? And to the client, that demonstrates to them, like, okay, you guys understand that, like, really the issue here is not the data capture, right? It's not going back and scrubbing that information and removing anything potentially sensitive. That's not really the issue here. It's really the end user. It's really the scientist and the engineer who's sitting at their desk, and they know they can't even take a Snapchat of their coffee or put a story on their Instagram of whatever they're having for lunch or whatever. But we're coming in with these really sensitive cameras. But to kind of show the client, like, we know these things, and we want your end users to understand so that they're not surprised. One, it makes your field work more efficient because you're not getting a billion questions. I mean, we always get a billion questions when we're doing stuff in this industry, right? But at least there's sort of some expectations set. And so, developing something like this with dates and times. This went out with a floor plan sequenced to a 4-hour block of when we were going to be in certain labs, certain office spaces, things like that, in which somebody knew that around sometime between 11 and 2 o'clock on Monday, we're going to be in their space, and they need to put away anything sensitive potentially, or have their conversations in a different area. So on top of that, right, like when you get into the field work, so, what do we have to do? One thing it's sort of a lessons learned, right? So you have to have a comprehensive conversation with the owner, with the client, with the operator of the facility on sort of like what the plan is. And so, in almost all cases, and we'll do a quick tips and tricks thing in a second, in almost all cases, we never, ever, ever take the data offsite. From the time we start the scanner in the morning, we do 15, 20,000 square feet of above ceiling space. There's already a clear plan. There's already a point of contact. There's already somebody established in which we know, one, the data is not going to be hosted in some sort of cloud-based platform at any point throughout the whole project, regardless of what stage it's in. And two, all the data that we're capturing on site is going to be left on site until we've had a chance to go through and scrub it and clean it up and stuff like that. So, having that conversation and setting expectations on file storage and data management, what the field process is going to look like, explaining to your, in our situation, the Faro scanner, right, is saved on an SD card. So like we have a conversation with them that like we need a security contact in which at the end of each shift, each day, the SD cards are going to go in a pouch. They're going to go to a security person. They're not going to leave this site until we come into the next day, pick them up and start doing the next shift. And so setting that expectation, having that conversation, both as part of the field process, the post processing process, and the scan, the modeling process is very important. And then really knowing the spaces, right? We talked about having that walkthrough. We know, like, having some understanding to what extent you can of what we should not be accidentally capturing is important. In some cases, some equipment will allow you to turn the laser capture off below certain heights and things like that, or certain windows of space. Having those conversations and understanding with the client on, I didn't put it in here. We did a manufacturing facility in Connecticut once in which we could not capture anything below like a 7-foot level. So we had to turn the laser off and just completely cut out and black out all of the information below sort of eye level for the scanner. Right. And so, and that's not a secure, it was a secure facility in terms of it had proprietary process and information, but it wasn't a defense contractor. Right. And so knowing your equipment and understanding your equipment and what the expectations are from the client on what you absolutely will not capture under any circumstances is really, really important. And then, have the right tool for the job, right? I love our VLX, right? I love our VLX. A lot of cases we're doing above ceiling MEP scanning, so we don't get to use that much. But even if it was an architectural only project, not having the control over the cloud processing, the person scrubbing, the data scrubbing, not being able to go and just grab whole sections and delete point cloud, right? Like, we can't use the VLX. It would take us a third of the time, maybe 25% of the time on an architectural only type of project. But that tool doesn't have the right process workflow for us to work and use it in those spaces. Is it painstaking to go do 80,000 square feet with the Faro scanner that we could do in 2 hours with the VLX? Not available to us. And so I think sometimes, like, we'll talk about it in a second. There are just things that we've grown accustomed to that are huge efficiency gains for us that get sacrificed, I think, working in this industry because on-site registration and stuff like that, like, not really available to you, depending on some other things. And so, having the right tool for the job, knowing that it doesn't matter how hard you try to hide information, make sure people put information away, you are going to capture something that is deemed a security concern to whoever your client is, and they're going to expect you to scrub it. Right. So, like, that takes a Matterport out of play. Any of these SaaS or cloud-based processing tool, nope, it's just not going to happen. And that can be frustrating. That can be frustrating. That can be tough and challenging. But, we have so many tools now. We have so many different platforms and stuff like that. That's really important that you know what each of those are capable of and then apply it to the right situation. I'll just show you an example. I won't tell you the client. Right. This is an example of just one scan that we had to do at a facility we scanned for a defense contractor. Right. Every desk gone. Didn't matter what was on. It could be totally clean. It could be totally empty cubicle. Gone. Even declassified public information like marketing materials hung on the wall in the office as sort of like promotional stuff. Deleted. Names on doors, deleted. Room numbers, deleted, right? So, in a lot of cases, especially in the federal, in the defense contractor space, right, you got to scrub it all, and so what are we left with here, really? Nothing discernible. Nobody on this call could know exactly where this place is, what it looks like, right? All we see is some partition walls for some cubes, some walls for some offices, duct and piping, right? And so, I think you get it, James, right? Like, man, like, all we have left is what we really need to model, right? The walls, doors, some partitions for stuff. And by the way, there was 900 scans on this project, and every single one of the 900 scans had to be sat down with somebody from the security team, reviewed over someone's shoulder on site in their security office. 900 scans, and we're deleting like the minutia. And that if you want a pro tip, right? Like, we had to make sure, client sees 2 weeks of post-processing time for 4 days worth of work. And they're like, whoa, you guys said that this was like a 1-to-1 or a 1-to-1/2 type of situation. It's like, well, somebody's got to sit for a week with your security people and scrub every piece of information. Right. And so This is the result, and this is sort of the expectation. This, I can't tell you what project this is either, but I mean, look at this on the left side, right? Literally deleted everything but the sphere and the ceiling. And then we had to do that in the column, right? So we were able to get some of the architectural, but literally we said to them, we need to keep these spheres for us to tie it in. They said, fine, that's fine, delete everything but the sphere. And so, to painstakingly go through 1,000 or 1,500 scans and delete everything except for the survey targets and the above ceiling, like that's sort of the expectation that happens in this space, which is really, really interesting. And when you get used to it and that that's the expectation, right? For us to walk into a new client who's never done this before and say, hey, look, here's what we did in some other space that's very similar to yours, and this is what we're going to do for you. You're going to expect to see an increase in cost because of it, but we've done this on 40 projects in which not once have we ever had an issue with a breach of security or a breach of confidentiality. Not once. And for the client to see that process and that effort and that thinking and that mindset and that workflow, and to show them, hey, you know what, we did a similar project to this. Here's what we talked about. Here's what we're going to do. Here's our workflow. Here's our process. Here's all the communication we sent to the end users. Here's what you can expect. Here's what we expect from you. All of a sudden, they're like, this is great. We can do this anywhere, right? And so, it's painstaking, but man, like once you build that trust, once you build that rapport with a client, and you've demonstrated you can work in their most secure and sensitive spaces without a breach of security, they will bring you back for every single project. It will be negotiated. You're not going to bid. You'll become a trusted partner of working within their facilities, which I think is really cool. And
that is awesome.
We just have two more quick slides, I think, before maybe you and I can have some dialogue, or we can open it.
Yeah, and there's some questions. We're getting some questions right now. There is an open question and answer box. So anyone who has questions, please just throw them in there. We'll answer them either here in real time or as we near the end. We'll have time for everyone to ask Sean questions. I'm even getting a few more on things like this. So,
and I certainly, I don't want to keep people, but I know we got maybe 12 minutes left. I'm certainly happy to stay for another 10 minutes or so too if we need to answer those questions, James. It's not a problem.
Perfect.
But let's just do some quick tips and tricks, right? Everything we do in these types of facilities are super generic. It'll be state office. That's the name of the scanning files, right? There's no discernible information about the client, what the project is, what the building is, where the building is located. It could just be generic office building _ L1, right? And so, demonstrating and thinking about those things and saying to the client, like, listen, we're going to scrub all this information, but let's say accidentally we do get something that we weren't supposed to. Even then, if it happened to get leaked or hacked or whatever, and nobody really knows that we're working on these projects, right? So it would just have to be like a cloud break, something, right? Nobody would know what it is or where it is or who it is or whatever. And so thinking about sort of generic naming conventions and things like that for your point cloud files, for your scan files, totally a smart move. It's none the wiser to you when you're working with your teams. You know what the project is, where it is, where it is relative to the floor plans and whatever. But, if it ever, for whatever reason, accidentally fell in the wrong hands, no big deal. That on-site data security piece can't be understated, right? We've even had clients in which we've purchased a laptop for the project, took all the raw scans, dumped them on the computer, did all our processing, scrubbed all that information, and then took the modified files offsite on a hard drive and left them, the computer and the SD cards and all that other stuff, and they just destroyed it. Right. So being flexible, but really making sure that you're not taking information off site. I mean, how many of us have seen all the spy thriller movies where the guy has to sneak a USB drive out the security, right? It's the same thing. It's the same exact thing, right? And like the whistleblower thing is always some guy with the USB in the bottom of the coffee cup sneaking out the front door. You can't do it. You just can't do it. And so making sure that you're leaving those SD cards or the hard drives or whatever. I mean, heck, we even leave the scanners on site through the duration of all these projects so that we're never accused of taking something offsite accidentally. We'll take the batteries loose in a backpack home, charge them overnight, and come back. Scanners and the SD cards stay on site, so we're done with the job. And then we've talked about it. Prepare for those long review sessions with security teams. I mean, We did an 80,000 square foot facility, 1,500 scans. It had to just get wiped, every single piece of it, just cleaned up, cleaned up, cleaned up, cleaned up, and so, prepare for that. There's a cost impact to you for that as well that you should not be paying for, right? The client should be paying for, but having that conversation, expecting that is important. And then just sort of lastly, like really try to limit cloud-based usage as much as possible. We used to use Dropbox for everything. I mean, we still do use Dropbox for a lot of stuff, but just to be able to tell the client that like, hey, listen, this is never going to be in the cloud. It's never going to be here. It's never going to be there. That helps build that trust as well. So like things like ACC, if you use like ACC for modeling, you might want to just do a traditional central model for your Revit model on your server, and then none of that stuff ever enters the cloud, which is important. These clients have very robust security protocols. They have secure file transfer sites and stuff like that you have to use. Perfect, fine, and then their IT people, their cybersecurity people are really happy. And then sort of one last slide before we maybe get into questions. Like I think I said this before, right? Expect that things that have been conveniences to you or things that have been monumental leaps in our industry over the last 10 years that we didn't have 10 years ago are not going to really be available in some situations, right? If you're an RTC 360 user, on-site registration through the tablet might be okay, but like you're not going to be able to plug it into the wall and get an internet connection. They're not going to give you the Wi-Fi. You know what I mean? So you might be able to do some of the on-site registration stuff when you're tethered to the scanner itself. But like when it comes to like, sometimes even charging the batteries, let alone a tablet that could be connected to the internet, like bringing that tablet in that's could be connected to the internet, it's like a no-go. It's just not going to happen in some facilities. Like an airport or something like that, no problem, right? No problem. But some of these DoD facilities, some of these defense contractor facilities, Wi-Fi enabled devices are like an absolute no. Some places won't even let you bring your phone in. So that's a challenge for us too, because we're doing a lot of above ceiling surveying. We use our phones for to connect to the scanner and run it in the ceiling. Some places won't let you bring your cell phone in. It's expected it's going to stay in the car and it's not going to come with you through security. So having that conversation with the client, striking a middle ground and figuring out what that is, you might be walking around with a 4-foot ladder to reach up and hit start on the scanner. You know what I mean? That might happen. And then, really expect that a lot of this stuff is done in the half-hour, third-hour shift, third shift type of stuff overnight. Nobody's around. People have cleaned up and put their stuff away. That's more true, I think, in a lot of the federal work that we've done. So like at the airport level or in the GSA or when we did some work for the architect at the Capitol, it was like a Sunday morning at like 7 a.m. with nobody around, and that's something to expect if you want to do work in this market. It's going to be a lot of off hours. It's going to be a lot of overnight stuff. That's not always true. I mean, we've done some DoD stuff during the day. We've done some defense contractor stuff during the day. But by and large, it's when nobody's around and sensitive conversations aren't being had. And then expect your sequence to go, pardon my language, expect your sequence and planning to go to shit sometimes, just quite frankly. Conference rooms with very highly sensitive conversations, compartmentalized conversations. I mean, you'll come across meetings in which somebody who works for the person you're working for is not even read in on the program, can't be in the conference room. And then you show up and you're like, dude, we're going to do the conference room at 11 o'clock. And then suddenly meeting got scheduled. They're having a sensitive conversation. You can't be in there. Okay, I guess we're going to have to figure out a way to come back and get it. Especially in facilities that have skiffs and stuff like that. Just you think you have a plan and then a sensitive conversation needs to happen. They pop in the skiff and you're like, okay. We've had it where we've had to go back just for a couple hours just to do a space that we could have done in sequence, but we couldn't get in there, but we need it now. So we had to go back and add an extra day or a half day or something like that and have conversation with your owner, your client to say, hey, we didn't carry time to go back and do this. We need additional time or whatever. More times than not, they're very accommodating. We work in some facilities in which you have to have an escort and you literally cannot leave that person's site. So, expect that one of your guys on your crews has to use the restroom. Guess what? All 4 of you now have to go with the security guy down the hall, put the scanner down, go down the hall, wait for the guy to use the restroom so that you're not out of sight and you're not out of mind or whatever. There's an efficiency loss really that happens to working in these types of facilities, whether it's just a security reason, an escorting issue, Just it's just, you might say, oh, I know I can get this done in a day. Plan it for two because something's going to probably pop up that'll cause an issue, and suddenly you have to go back, or you didn't get the efficiency that you thought you were because of whatever reason. So that's it. I mean, I know I've hammered up here now for 55 minutes, but I think there's a pretty robust coverage there in terms of working in these types of facilities, and some things that we've learned are really important.
Yeah, I think so too, Sean. This has been, I mean, really, really valuable. And I love how, yeah, in that last little piece, there's an efficiency loss. I think it's funny how, so much of this, it keeps coming back to the relationship and gaining and establishing trust. And it's almost like a romantic relationship in a way where it's like, forget the efficiency. They want to see you put in extra
Yes.
time and effort and care for their best interest. That's
Play the
it.
client, not the
Like,
project.
yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Like,
It's like
like
the
I put it in big bold, right? Play the client, not the project, is really what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. All right. Well, we do have a bunch of questions. So what I'll do, I'll just read some of these out. I don't know if everyone can see them, but we'll go through, we'll answer some. There's some really good ones here. And if anyone else does have questions, please keep chiming them in. I do at least have one more, Sean, if it doesn't get asked before. But first question, do your clients ever find a need to be able to view the images for their reference? And if so, where are the scans hosted?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, like, there's a number of deliverables that come out of this process that they should and want full access to. Like, we've shown you some snippets from the web share platform that Faro uses, or I forget the Leica equivalent of that, Clearview, TrueView, something like that. Certainly they want that. In a lot of cases, we've had to just create sort of an offline package. So it's not actually physically posted on, I'll only speak because we use Faro, but like, it's not actually posted on a web share cloud. It's posted in a web share to go type situation and sent to them securely, and then they can use it and view it. And same for our team. Our team can use it offline to look while they're modeling it, sort of the panorama versus the scanning. And that's not necessarily frowned upon. I think if you're demonstrating a knowledge of, especially where you've already scrubbed all the information, right? There's not much to be lost. And so it depends. It's a conversation you have to have with your client. It's a project by project or a client by client basis.
Awesome. Awesome. And I think that translates into this next piece, which you kind of just answered, but I'll ask it, read it out, and then if you want to reiterate on it or share a little more. What's the protocol for sharing this data with design team in these projects, or is that frowned upon?
Depends on the client, depends on the project. I think in a lot of cases, the intent for the owner is to get this into the hands of the design team. And so keeping that information on site, redacting it, removing, scrubbing it. We call it scrubbing. We just call it data scrubbing. And doing that, in a lot of cases, they've been to the facility, right? Like, this is sort of happening in conjunction with a construction or design project that's kicking off. In a lot of cases, not all cases. And so, they've been read into certain things in the facility. And so the client, in a lot of cases, is the nucleus in which we're sending that information scrubbed, processed, and converted to them. And they're funneling it back after they've had a chance to review it and send it to the design team. Certainly not, I wouldn't say not frowned upon. I think expected is certainly the case. But let the owner do it, right? So, like, the owner has their design team they want to work with. Even if you have been brought in by the design team as a consultant in this type of work, we had one project in which we were brought in by the architect to do the scanning and then introduced to the client. We did all the data scrubbing with the client and then sent the hard drive of the data to their client, who then redistributed it back to the design team. But they had custodial control over the data the entire time, from the time we stepped on site to the time they sent it to the design team. That even though our client, the person paying us, was the architect, the owner owned, their client, the owner, the operator, the institution, whoever, owned the security piece and data information piece and whatever, which is really interesting.
Yeah. Coming back also always to that, extra mile in communication. Ask them, this is with all these guys, it's ask, do not, this is not a ask forgiveness, kind of scenario. This is an ask permission, in every case, and communicating pieces all the way. All right. Can you elaborate on how images are being altered to redact the information?
Um, so I mean, in a lot of situations, we're doing black and white for this. So like in an instance where we had images, right, like you would have to really go in and alter those in like a Photoshop or something like that to, you could go live to the images, the smaller 360 panos and stuff like that, and alter them in a Photoshop or whatever. For us, the images that you've seen in this presentation are the wrapped sort of panoramic view, I guess, from the point cloud data. There's a different word for that I'm not quite getting right. But we're physically deleting the points in that situation. Somebody's sitting with somebody from the security team, grabbing whole swaths of points and deleting it, removing it. And then once that information has been scrubbed and the client's confident we've gone through every scan and we've scrubbed it, we're taking only the modified redacted scans offsite in some different medium. And then any of the raw scan formats or anything that would still have the original information is destroyed. Like we'll buy an entire set of SD cards for a project in this space with the intent that we're just going to leave them with them at the end of the job and they're going to destroy them. And we're only taking the modified files that was done on a computer offsite with us to start the modeling process.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. That leads right up into our next piece too, which is after scrubbing the scans, are you taking them offsite for registration?
Yes. Typically, yes. We have had projects in which we've had to do the registration on site for like not in the way that we use on-site registration, but like with the client, do the registration and take just the actual exported point clouds offsite. We have had projects in which we've had to do that. That project I described in which we could only capture below a certain height because there was very proprietary process, manufacturing happening. We had to scan, scrub, register all on site on one computer with the client. Once that was finished, we exported and grouped the point clouds onto a hard drive, left the computer, the SD cards, and all that stuff with the client, and took a hard drive with just the RCS files offsite to start the modeling process. So sometimes we can scrub it. The client's happy that it's been scrubbed and we don't have any proprietary information. We do the registration back to the office. Other times we've had to do the registration on site as well.
Now, I've got a question or two on that. I've got a question or two on that as well. So the scrubbing portion, when does that always happen? Like end of your scanning day, you bring the data to their security officers and do it, or when does the scrubbing happen? And
after field work's done.
After the field work is done, after all the field work is done.
Yeah, our typical workflow would be mobilize with the scanners and the SD cards. If it's 2 or 3 days, we'll do the 2 or 3 days. The scanners and the SD cards stay on site. Usually the client's more than happy to give us an office or a closet to lock things in overnight. The security folks will hold the SD cards overnight. Somebody designated by the client will hold the SD cards overnight. And so they never leave the job site. Neither do the scanners until done. And then we'll start the scrubbing process next day after fieldwork is done, or within a few days after fieldwork is done until completed. And then we'll leave offsite with the scrub data.
Okay. So when you run registration, are you able, what you showed in the scrubbing, that was in the 360 panos, right? Yep. That wasn't technically the point cloud, but obviously you'll scrub the point cloud too, I'm guessing. Are you able to do registration?
The point cloud comes out of those scrubbed scans.
Yes, but to distinguish, you got the photo and then you got the points in a way, which obviously like link. But are you able to register the scans and then scrub the data after registration, or do you have to?
If we needed to,
if you needed to,
but we would have to do that registration on site with the client. Right.
We'd
be commuting in some cases for us, like for us on our airport work, they don't have a review process on our airport work. There's an expectation we're going to delete TSA agents and baggage screenings things and end users, people who might be walking or sleeping in the terminal. Like that's just good business practice anyways, right? To scrub that data. In the environments in which, we have to leave the data on site, If we had to do that, and we don't do a lot of target list registration stuff too, which makes it a little bit easier for us. But if we wanted to,
Sure.
maybe run a target list solution and then we would just process it on site, then scrub it. That would require us commuting in, and some of our clients are in Western Mass, New York, North New Hampshire. Like there's still hour plus drives every day to the job site. That can be a bit of a challenge, but we would, in that case, complete the registration process on site, especially in a cloud to cloud situation, a target list situation, and then scrub it and then take the scrub data with us.
Got it.
That the important thing there, right, is leave the site until
Yeah,
the client says to you explicitly, we're confident that you don't have any secure or confidential information in this data. It stays there. It stays on site. And that's not something that we've been mandated. It's just sort of the culture that we've built working in these projects, on these types of projects, that allows us to walk into the client and say, hey, hold on, before you even tell us what your bare minimum is, this is our bare minimum. This is our expectation on how we're going to operate in your space, so that you never have to question that we took something offsite we weren't supposed to. And you know what they do? They go, okay, yeah, I mean, that makes sense to us. That's great. Like, because they didn't know
Yeah.
that they were gonna ask for that eventually when somebody from security or whatever got to them. But to kind of, I hate to say it, I hope none of my clients are on the call, to kind of have to spoon feed them, like, this is the best way we've found working in this type of environment. Does this work for you? More times than not, they're like, yes, that's absolutely, that'll make our security people so happy. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So,
I think that makes sense. But you're spoon feeding in a way where you've earned the trust and you've earned the respect. You're laying out your whole sales, even from the very beginning, coming back to the pitch that you discussed. It's
yeah,
not a sales pitch so much as a project that you have reverse engineered, and you're saying, here are all the pieces that we understand, and not
absolutely.
specific to the project, but specific to the customer and the customer's needs and issues. So you've been
Absolutely.
able to earn that kind of respect or trust from the client
Yep.
by totally stepping into their shoes and saying, our primary concerns are what you need to protect, your safety, your protection,
Yep.
and this is the best way we found to do that. And you're able to say that when you really demonstrate you understand their issues thoroughly. You obviously have a portfolio and experience to back that, but you're just saying, this is what we want to do. This is our mission. This is how we find it best. This work
So
for
I
you.
was just going to say, like, just to put a bow, I think, on the whole conversation, right? I think it's easy for us because we can walk in and say we have such an expansive portfolio of working in
Right.
this space. But if you're an attendee on this webinar right now and you're interested or you want to start working with clients in these types of spaces, these tips and I hope to put a bow on it, right? These tips and tricks and the things that we've done to kind of build that portfolio, coupled with the mindset of how to approach the client and pitch it. When you put those things together, you don't necessarily need the portfolio because they're going to be impressed with the way you're thinking about working in their facility. You're not just coming in and saying, we'd love to give you a 3D model of all your duct and piping and walls and doors and windows. You're coming in and saying, we understand you have a need. We understand you also have a security challenge here. Here's the way that we want to work in your space that has security and confidentiality and data security first and foremost at the front of our mind. You don't need a portfolio of work in this space if you are presenting to these clients in that way, which I think is really cool.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Sean, this has been great. Thank you
Yeah, I
so much.
agree. Thank you for
Yeah.
having me. I love the RCN team,
Yeah. We
and
love having you. It's an honor to have you with us.
always
Honor to have
happy.
you as our chair as well for the laser scanning committee, as you
Come
mentioned,
say hi
which,
at Archon. I'll be in
yes,
Archon.
for everyone. I know Sean mentioned it, but if you came a little later, or you want to hear this piece and how to get involved in our community, we have a series of committees of which Sean is the chair. Laser scanning, you can get involved by going to the RCN website and the community page. And the whole focus here is, discussing networking, finding best practices, best technologies on how we can do better with the technology. What does the technology allow us to do? How can we win opportunities? What are we able to do with these kind of tools to expand our businesses? What kind of new tools are coming out to help us do that? Sean, obviously one being being our chair, pushing the envelope on that a lot. So encourage everyone to be involved, join our committee, participate.
I'm excited about the professional certification focus group. We need that in our industry. Shameless plug.
Yes, that'll be a good one. We're working on a lot of very exciting things. So join,
Absolutely.
participate, collaborate with people like Sean. And then also, as Sean mentioned, we have our conference coming up. So I think we're just under 3 weeks, October 7th to the 10th. That's going to be our conference in Boise. Sean, you'll be there. Lots of other professionals doing similar kind of work.
Be on a
You'll be
panel
there.
talking
Yep.
about all the cool stuff we're doing up here. Not up here, sorry, not up here in the Northeast. Cool stuff we're doing on the committee.
Yeah. So please
We're doing
come.
cool stuff up here in the Northeast too.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, thank you, Sean. Thank you, everyone, for joining,
Thank you to the
participating with us
participants for
today.
sure.
Yeah. We'll talk to you all again soon.